Welcome to the 70th edition of Women's Wrestling Weekly, the show. Last show was a breakdown of all of the NCAA Women's Freestyle Championship brackets. This time we get to talk about the NAIA Championships, just had the conference allocations, had the conference championships take place. We'll talk a little bit more about the NCAA Women's Championships, get to the ranking series, and the Real American Freestyle match between Everest Leidecker and Lucia Yepes. Let's start with the NAIA conference weekend. What a photo finish it was at the Heart of America. It was William Penn over Grandview by one single point, Scott. And if you don't think every single point matters, guess you didn't watch the Heart of America Conference Championship. We talked about that with it being Life University. They had their conference championship the week prior. They're sending 12 to the national tournament, but don't count out Grandview at this point, where they have a lot of depth. You know the firepower for William Penn. It could be a tight team race, but right now it looks like it's comparable to what the NCAA is having, where you're going to have Iowa, McKendree, North Central. It looks like you're going to have Life, William Penn, Grandview, and then potentially Providence on the outside looking in. Providence won its conference championship. Tell you what, it's fun to have these tight team races, and I think we're in store for one at the NAIA Championships.
Yeah, it seems like we're going to get one there as well as the NCAA, and yeah, it really is. It is fun, and because you start watching the tournament, then you see an upset, then you start doing the calculations, like what's going to happen. So it definitely is very interesting. And I think it's going to come down, and in many cases, I think, Life is clearly the favorite, but, there's going to be landmines that can do damage, upsets. I mean, these things, as we said, never go chalk. And it could be, the outcome of the tournament can easily be determined by, a landmine or two from a team that has no chance of remotely competing for the title. You just never know how these things play out.
Each team has its own advantage. So with William Penn, you know that they have the firepower that can get through to the finals, and Mia Palumbo, Christina Ogunsanya at 117, and then Esther Kolawale at 138. Pretty much, I don't want to say guaranteed. We talked about that last show where you don't want to put that on someone that there's a guarantee, but they are so good. They've been proven commodities. They're returning national champions, have done things at the world level that you have to feel good about what they can do and get to the finals. But Life University has some of those too, where they can push to the finals, and then you have the extended depth where you're going 12 deep. Life is going to need every bit of that. They can't just rely on the top end firepower just to get them through. They're going to need that 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. They got to get on the podium in order for them to repeat.
Yeah, so again, it comes down to, and this may be what ultimately does determine the tournament is, how the athletes do on the backside after taking losses. Do they, are they demoralized and, get eliminated right away, or can they come through and, take a fifth place or a fourth place or something like that, where you're getting team points and then, ideally too, bonus points on the backside, or, a lot of times it's funny where somebody loses, but they can gather a lot of points on the backside if they're very good, because they can get those, tech falls and falls.
You have to take advantage of the McBryde sisters while you have them. This is their final season. Life loses a ton after this year. You know that they're top to bottom and they're going to have to reload next season. So to win back-to-back is difficult. They won by 70 last year. Then, of course, they lost a national finalist at 110, lost a national champion at 207. Now they have this opportunity to really show their development and come through in the clutch. Back-to-back's difficult. Just winning one is hard. And it was the monkey on their back for Life University to finally get that done. They dominated. This one's going to be much tougher.
Absolutely. But I mean, you do have, there's 12 athletes, here. It's not just one per weight, but 25% of the lineup are McBrides that have had great careers and all have won national titles. So, yeah, you better take advantage of the last time you have. And that is going to be a major loss, when in the middle of the lineup, you just lose three pretty consistent known quantities that have performed very well over the years.
And Sarah Savage and Selena Shotwell and Anna Graza, just going down the line of who they've had that have been just verifiable quantities for Life University that have really defined that program. You aren't going to have them anymore. So really have to take advantage. But the team race part is fun when you can have not just the two, when you can have multiple. And you really can't count out Grandview because even though they're still seeking the first individual national champion, the reason they've been successful is because they develop as a team, that they have team depth top to bottom, and it showed at the conference tournament, and it's going to have to show at the NAIA Championships in a couple weeks.
Yeah, I mean, I just you need some hammers, though, to really contend, and it's for them. They do a very solid team, but they don't have like superstars, where you just have murderers row, or where you have five people that have five or more people that have legitimate chances to be finalists and champions.
One thing I'd like to know from the coaches, so when you look at the brackets, you'll get into the meet, you'll get into 110 through 180, you'll get 10 or 11 or a full bracket, but 103 and 207 seem to be extremely hard to field athletes at those weight classes at the bookends. And you kind of understand it because you can't really bump someone up, you can't drop someone down. But I would love to hear from coaches on why that is so difficult to field athletes in those weight classes. Because I looked at, I think it was Heart of America. There were five at 103, five at 207, and the rest had full brackets. I just think it's something that we need to look at and address those weight classes.
Well, I mean, I think the issue is if you just look at a Gaussian distribution of a bell curve, where do people, what's the average weight of people? And, there's, just at those bookends, there are just less potential athletes. But the beauty of wrestling, right, is that everybody can wrestle. So you need these weight classes at the little tails on the bell curve. And, I think it's important that we have them. So just because the brackets aren't as full, because the pool of potential, wrestlers is less, I think it's important that we have that. And in fact, you and I have talked about this where, we think at the senior level, if they redo the weights, we were talking about ideally maybe you go from 50 as the lowest kilos to 48 because we believe that some great athletes are kind of being, I don't want to say excluded because they can wrestle at 50, but they're just not optimized, right? They're small for the weight, and it's really not a level playing field. They're kind of almost going up a weight to wrestle at the lowest weight. So, that's an issue, I think, in that sense. So I like having that 103 at the college, you know what I mean? Where, so maybe, in theory, that's probably why, though, is because you're adding, a lower weight that's below the kind of lowest senior weight.
One of the disappointments, as much as we like Cristelle Rodriguez, she is so much fun to watch. She is must-watch television, just like we've talked about Kylie Welker, Kennedy Blades, Audrey Jimenez. She's in that category of a senior world team member who's in college. I love watching her wrestle because of what she brings to the table as the low-level shots, mid-level, can go up.
All.
She has it all, and she's one of my favorite people to watch wrestle. She only had one match at the conference championships. I think there was only 3 in that bracket, maybe 4. I just would love to fix that a little bit or get to that point where we can see these high-level athletes in a high-stakes environment where we can watch Cristelle Rodriguez a little bit more than we did this season because she is so much fun to watch.
Yeah, but the funny thing is if that was a full bracket, we get to watch her for another minute and a half or something, because she's just going to rip through, the lesser quality people. And, I mean, she rips through quality people, so, but I do love watching her wrestle because she really does pretty much have a full game, like she's good in most positions. She can hit explosive shots. I like in doubles. She'll do the lifts and she'll do and then she'll hit low levels. I mean, she's very dynamic, very fun to watch.
As we talked about the qualification differences between the NAIA and the NCAA, completely different because you have a layered process where you have some at-large bids and some opportunities to get in, even if you had a body of work, whereas the NCAA, you only have the top 3 out of the 6 regionals. I like that still, but I think still with some of those regions where you don't have quite the depth that winner's going to get in, it is tough to know exactly what the formula is, but I think the NAI is pretty darn close to getting a good formula to get to the right 21 to the national tournament.
Yeah, I agree with you completely. I mean, I think that I like that better, the way they're doing it. And I just like the idea of just in general, I like the idea of like, kind of like wild cards because, if somebody just has a bad day, you're looking more at the body of work than just kind of just one tournament.
I want to go back to something you said about when you get into the consolation. So we talked about that potential at the NCAA Championships of a quarterfinal match between Gabby Tedesco of McKendree and Nyla Valencia of the University of Iowa. This will be a rematch of the finals of the Missouri Valley Open, where Valencia was up 3-0 and Tedesco won in the final seconds. We talked about how important that is, but the winner will likely face Audrey Jimenez in the semifinal round. I think one of the things that happens is you get excited when you win a big match like that, and you should because it's going to be Iowa against McKendree, presumably for the top two spots. However, there's this layered piece of this where losing in the quarterfinals actually might be an advantage because you have more opportunities. Now, if you lose, it's really bad because you're out of the tournament. So that's the bad part.
So,
right?
so the real question is, if somebody did like 3D chess, and they would never do this, but not that they wouldn't play 3D chess, but even if they saw it out this way and looked at the cross bracketing, and if you lose and the hole you get, and can you, would one of these coaches ever ask an athlete to lose on purpose to get to the backside so they could have the bonus point? They shouldn't, and they wouldn't, but it would be very interesting thought experiment.
But think about that because if you lose in the quarters, one for advancement. So if you go on the backside, the advancement cuts in half, and this is something I've always said I don't think is right because I think all the bonus points should be cut in half once you get down into the consolation. They don't do that. But that is monster points if you're able to get a fall or a tech. You get 1.5 bonus and 2 bonus for the fall. That is a big advantage. So if you're able to go all the way back through, so whoever presumably loses that Tedesco versus Valencia match, if it happens in the quarters, if they are good enough, and you don't know who you're going to hit on either side. So if you're losing here, you don't know what the matchup's going to be because you don't know who lost there. And then you come back through. So if it's Tedesco or Valencia that loses that in the quarterfinals, you might be able to come back through, blitz through, and then maybe even meet Valencia or Tedesco
again for third and fourth, and then win when it matters. But exactly, it's really interesting if you think about it. I mean, how about the concept like, and these are not going to be massive brackets, but when you're in like big brackets, like Fargo brackets with hundreds of 150 athletes, you wouldn't want to lose it early because you're losing the front, right? But if you're on the backside or like the Missouri Valley Open, each round you lose can have like 2 more matches because of the people that are left. So you really have a lot more bonus point opportunities, in the big brackets. These are interesting, things that, but yeah, in a perfect world, if you could, if it goes like kind of chalk on the backside, is like, you probably want to lose first in the quarters and then rip through the backside and beat them for third and fourth. If those are like, if it comes to that,
but that's important to remember because whoever wins that quarterfinal match between Tedesco and Valencia, again, if it happens, the crowd's going to be excited.
And they'll be excited, and they for not potentially.
Correct. So
but then again, what if one of them takes out Jimenez?
Yeah,
it seems unlikely, but you're not going to get a shot at it if you don't win. So it's interesting.
Correct. You could take out Jimenez, or if you lose in the quarters and you lose again in the consolation, you're out of the tournament. You can't. Yeah. So you're playing with fire either way. Like you don't want to lose because if you do, you have to be extremely confident on the backside, knowing that you can go all the way through.
Now, I would just really make it simple. You never want to lose. You always want to try to win. I mean, it might work out better if you have a crystal ball and things happen, but if that's the way you're competing, you're not gonna win anyway. You know what I mean? It's just a bad attitude.
Go back to the 2001 men's tournament that was won by Minnesota. They went 0 for 6 in the semifinals, and they came back and had a monster consolation round. So it's easy as a fan to want to get excited, look up at the scoreboard, think, "Oh, we got them. We got them right where we want them." But we saw that in 2024 with North Central and Iowa, where you think North Central is probably going to pull away. Iowa had that monster round, so you got to be careful. You want to get excited, don't get me wrong, but you have to be excited and rein it in a little bit because there's a lot of things that can play out.
A lot of things can and do happen. I don't think Minnesota had a champ that year. Was that Albany that year?
That was in Iowa City, so they did in Iowa City.
Yeah, but yeah, I mean it's interesting, but you gotta like be level headed and keep everybody cool both ways. And when people win, you just gotta be measured, excited. But when you lose, you still matter. You have to come back and be a backside warrior, and that in many tournaments that determines the team title.
And it applies to the NAIA too. So we're talking about having the depth. If you're saying Life University has the 12, don't think just because you lost in the quarterfinals of the opening round that you can't have a huge impact for your team. And we've seen that time and time again, where when you're in a team race or a trophy race, that there's added incentive to win that match. And you've seen that you have extra enthusiasm, you have an extra oomph to go out there and win.
Absolutely. And there is, and you see it, there is momentum by team in these tournaments where one of the athletes, will upset somebody and then it empowers people and everybody gets good vibes. I mean, it's definitely, it feeds on itself, when people start to perform well, or especially above their head.
You can get excited, and we want the fans to get excited and maybe point across the way and think you got momentum, but be careful until that final whistle blows, because I can tell you this from talking to some of these high-level coaches, and we'll take Dan Gable as an example. When he went to the NCAA Championships and he won 15 out of 21, he said that until he won the team championship, he felt like every night before he went to bed, it felt like he was going to die and had cancer, and he'd have this cold and he'd have a runny nose. He said as soon as the Hawkeyes won the championship, the feeling of having cancer went away. It like all washed out. And ask Jim Miller about this, who won 10 championships for Wartburg. He won't feel good, even if it's mathematically you're 1/2 a point away from winning a championship. If there's a mathematical opportunity to lose the championship, and it includes pinning everyone, which is so unlikely and so unheard of, he will not feel good about it until it's an absolute lock.
And there have been situations where somebody's got a team point deducted, and that mattered in the tournament. So, it's just very nerve-wracking, the whole process is, but that's what makes it exciting, especially when you have, a bunch of potential contending teams.
Scott, I want to go back to something you said on last show. You remember you talked about the depth of how we've gotten to this point where you look at the brackets and you can't believe that Brianna Gonzalez, a U.S. Open champion, is the 5 seed at 117, and we listed some other examples. I went through all of the weight classes, and I came up with about 50 that just didn't even make the tournament this year. So if you wanted to add additional depth, I won't go through all of them, but a few of the highlights just based on a variety of reasons. We've talked at 103 is the number one. You have Sterling Diaz, a national finalist, didn't make the postseason roster for Iowa. Rhiannon Murphy finished third last year, didn't make the postseason roster. Talked about Katie Valdez. She likely will redshirt for McKendree. Bree Graves was the starter throughout the season for North Central. Juliana Alejandro from William Penn. Christina Kent. Olivia Shore retired. Chloe Sheffield at 103 for Wartburg. 110, Ava Bayless is a returning national champion for Iowa. Emily Gonzalez, a returning national champion for Iowa. Genevieve Alejandro got injured at the regional tournament. She was a national finalist for Tiffin. Carissa Qureshi for North Central. Perseus Gomez, McKendree.
Carissa Qureshi has beaten Everest Lidecker, okay, in the World Team Trial Finals, Junior World Team Trial Finals. That's insane. That don't make the tournament. Not many people have beaten Everest Lidecker recently.
138, Grace Stem, North Central was an All-American. Sky Reeland, we've talked about. She was out of the lineup late for the University of Iowa. Sydney Perry was an All-American. Alexis Gomez for McKendree. Duda Rodriguez for McKendree.
Alexis Gomez wrestled in the World Championships, the
Correct.
Senior World Championships.
Correct. Cadence Diddick, Gretchen Donnelly from Colorado Mesa, Jasmine Robinson, Rose Cassiope, May Prado, J.L. Miller from North Central, and then 207, J.C. Feller, a four-time national
runner-up. This is insane. I feel bad for these people that didn't make it for various reasons. However, this just reinforces it. It's unbelievable. The people that didn't even make the tournament. These are good wrestlers.
And then just a few more at 207, Deja Yarby, who was the hero for North Central and the national duels, didn't make it. Eliana Bomarito from King, a two-time JUCO national champion, and Savannah Isaac, who was a NAIA national champion for Life University for a variety of reasons. Go across the board, didn't give all the reasons why they didn't make it into the national tournament. But to your point, Scott, the depth is insane when you look at the wrestlers who didn't make it to the tournament.
Yeah, that's good stuff. It's crazy.
Let's talk ranking series. I think it starts and stops, Scott, with Macey Kilty. What a tournament she had. Only gave up 2 points, won 4 matches, gold medal. That version of Macey Kilty, who is wrestling at 62 kilograms. She's been at 65 at the World Championships for the last 2 seasons. She looks as good as I've seen her, just hitting her shots. I know she's been working with two-time national champion Mark Ironside from Iowa a lot, and you can see some of the imprint of Mark Ironside, especially when she gets to the edge. Even when she gets a step out, she's aggressive and trying to shoot out her opponent, and I just love that mentality. She's just in this high-level type of wrestling right now, and if that version of Macey gets to the World Championships, that's going to be hard to stop.
For sure. Macey, I would have given her the OW the tournament. Like if they did that, she wrestled exceptionally well, dominant, on a mission, all business. This was a very difficult bracket. Along the way, Lindberg from Sweden took out Grace Boulin, who's had a few down matches recently. She's not looked great. But Macey, had to take out Ukraine, Propovniak, who beat Tandalova, who's good. And then Macey dominated Limborg, in the semis. And the finals, she had, Adaugo won 2 close matches. She had a very tough bracket. She beat India, and then she had to beat Dudova. This is their third meeting. She's won 2 of the 3, who was a world champion. I thought Dudova looked really good in her first match. Adaugo beat her late with a push out. And then she lost a close match to Sidel Nikova from Russia, who's at UW or whatever, who's a junior world champ and moved up a weight and has been wrestling pretty well at the senior level. And then Macey just dominated Sidel Nikova, just tacked her and just blew her out. And Macey was just literally relentless, looked amazing. Obviously for the U.S., among others, the idea that, when I say among others, you're going to have it's a bunch, it's a pretty deep weight class, but there's just a top 3 Kilty, Miracle, and Adaugo. That's just exceptionally solid. Putting the next tier, the Lara Boyd, among others, and it's just a very solid weight class for us domestically. And whoever makes the team is going to do very well. This version of Macey Kilty is going to be tough to beat. But there are matchups and styles, but she just really look good.
3 additional takeaways. Number 1, I love that Erin Golston is still competing because I don't think her best wrestling is behind her. I think it could be ahead of her. Just watching her matches, it just seems like she's hitting clean shots. It seems like she's in a good phase right now. That's takeaway number 1. Number 2, from a body lock, Adaugo Nwachukwu is the best in the world. When she gets to that position, she hit 3 unbelievable body throws when she got there that were absolutely brutal. And of course, you want to stay out of that. But if Adaugo can get there, she can dominate that position. And then number 3, Dymond Guilford is for real. I know that we've said that in the past, but her at 76 kilograms, she had some tight matches. She's positionally sound. I am not handing this to Kylie Walker by any means. We saw that at Final X, how competitive she can be. I think if Dymond Guilford continues to develop, Terry Steiner's got to feel good with whoever comes out of the United States at 76 kilograms. Of course, there's going to be others. You don't want to say across the board, but the class of the field for the last couple years has been Dymond Guilford and Kylie Welker, at least the last 2 years. Dymond Guilford's really good.
Oh, for sure. And think about it this way. I mean, and she hit Riasco, who's the current world champion in the first round, and lost a very close match, right? And then came back and took a bronze in a tough weight class. Riasco actually lost to Meta from Kyrgyzstan in the finals. But yeah, Guilford looked really good. She's very solid. When she's focused and on, she's on, and she can beat anybody, literally. And she matches up well with a lot of people, and she's getting, I think she's been wrestling well, obviously, like anybody, she's had ups and downs, but this version looks really good. I will address what Adaugo does well in that body lock is she shoots into it, and then it's also funny where sometimes people will go up a body with her, which she's probably smiling in her head, when they're going there, because they may think they're gonna win the position, but she just explodes into those body locks, and then when she's in that position, it's very difficult. So yeah, I mean, my interesting things, kind of that I thought, and Golston wrestled very well. I'm a big fan of Erin's, and took a loss early and came back and got the next best thing. I think, I mean, 62 was the weight of the weight class, but, it's good to see once again, Emma Brontil, back. She lost early to Ince from Romania, who's a two-time Olympian, was very solid, but she came back and took a bronze medal. Looked good on the backside. 59 was a tough weight class. I think the interesting thing there was that Hui of Norway, who has had some down tournaments recently a little bit relative to her senior world bronze medal, beat Nettie in a close match in the semis. Abby wrestled well and came back and took a bronze, and won the tournament. And then on the other side, Brugger lost in the first round to good Turkey, who was, Brugger's a world bronze. And then the Vinnick that just took a world silver and ran through her side of the bracket to get to the finals before getting annihilated by Onishi of Japan. Vinnick lost to Lipitova from Russia. And then Lipitova had a very close match with Gun from Turkey. But so there was some just some clumping, in 59 of very good wrestlers. And, Kasabieva wound up winning 65, who's very solid from Russia. So I think it was a good tournament. I mean, for the most part, these ranking series tournaments, what you notice is the weight classes aren't very full in terms of numbers of entries on the women's side. So there may be 9 to 15, but they're all good. Most countries don't send scrubs. And some good people lost, and some lost early. And, it's kind of funny where we'll see it's going to be interesting because I was going to make the observation, this is in Albania. And, it seems like every, UWW tournaments in, Albania, Croatia, or Serbia, because Russia doesn't go there. So I don't know how it's going to play out with Iran in the men's tournaments. Hopefully they're not going to be punished for the regime, because they're great wrestlers and I love, watching them wrestle, and, good people. So we'll see, how that plays out, but I don't know what's going to, if there's going to be, I'm just throwing it out there. It's a men's team because they don't allow women to wrestle in Iran, but we now have politics potentially coming into wrestling again. And it'll be interesting to see if that affects venues and how teams wrestle in that format.
Real American Freestyle, Lucia Yepes won 10-3 over Everest Lidecker, the high schooler. Even though it looks like a big margin, it was a close match. And you had, in the first period, you had Yepes get 2 takedowns. Lidecker got 1 in the second, and then she got those cheap tilts in the third period, and then got the reversal.
Guzman is top in the world, top 2, 3 in the world always recently. Everest pretty much went with her. There was a little bit of a big sistering, I think a little bit of physicality from Guzman, who I thought that might be possible. At the end of the day, it was one position, a belly roll position, where Everest was in a leg and got tilted 3 times. I think the next time she'll realize in that position, if she got tilted once, I'm losing this position. This is her good position. Let go of the leg, give up the 2, move on. That was a tactical mistake, and she'll grow from it. She should be encouraged by this match, not not at all upset. She's right there. She can go with anybody.
NCAA Championships this weekend, March 6th and 7th. Scott Beck said he's watching.
I'm going to be watching, and I hope anybody in driving distance can actually be there, because it's going to be a great tournament.